Hey guys, this is Tommy from the Ravens Creek Study. We're continuing through our little study here on what is Bible, or what is the Bible. Essentially, we're going through a biblical theology. We've come to the place where we've traced the eternal covenant through Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and we're looking at it now in Genesis chapter 3 with the fall. So I wanted to set up our understanding of the fall by pointing out it's not simply that Adam and Eve have fallen, but the entirety of the creation has come into disunion with God. It has come into a fallen state that it is not at the same place it was with the original intention. The first time that you have humanity being told they're allowed to eat meat is in Genesis chapter 9, 8 or 9, I think it's 9. It's very possible that originally there was not any carnivorous animal possible. We have, with the creation falling, the idea then that the whole of creation must also be redeemed, which you see in the new heaven, new earth, which most likely you know this from Revelation 21 and 22, but it's also mentioned in Isaiah 65 and Isaiah 66. You have verses like Romans 8:19 through 22, where it talks about how the entirety of creation moans and groans, waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. Isaiah 11 here, you know this passage. This is the lion and the lamb laying down, the child being next to the serpent's mound and not having any fear. The little child leads all of these animals, and you think, well, that's going to be really dangerous, but the whole point is that it's not dangerous. Isaiah 62, you're probably not familiar with this one. This one is about the redemption of Israel, and God is saying, I'm going to redeem you, I'm going to marry you, Israel, but I'm not going to just marry you, I'm going to marry the land itself. And so there's a redemption for the land. And this is important because we have to understand if the fall affects everything, then redemption must also affect everything. So here we have, let's see, there's the next slide. Genesis 3, the fall of humanity, there's consequences to the fall. This is the first time that we see disunion. Adam and Eve were one with each other. They were echad. That's in Genesis 2:25. But here, suddenly, Adam, for the first time, is saying of Eve, that woman that you gave me, for the first time he's throwing her under the bus, thus creating a disunion with his own wife. Whereas before there was union with, between Adam and Eve, between Adam and the creation, between Adam and God. Now suddenly there's disunion. He's hiding from God. He's using the creation, manipulating the creation to hide himself. And now he's also creating disunion with his wife. So we see disunion coming in a very subtle but yet very powerful way here. This is also the first mention of shame, that in Genesis 2:25 they were naked and felt no shame. Now suddenly they're ashamed of themselves and they're hiding. And that's ultimately what law is, by the way. That's the whole point of law, is that you cloak yourself with something that you consider to be righteous. You see the fig leaf that covers fruit, it has a curl to it, and so it covers and hides the fruit, and here it is, Adam and Eve are using fig leaves to hide their shame, to hide their sin. It's the very same concept that traces all the way through to the very end, this idea of law. It doesn't necessarily mean the book of Leviticus, the book of Deuteronomy, like we've so often thought of it. So this idea of disunion and shame, it's from these two things that we derive the consequences that we call the curse. Notice something. Adam came from the ground, therefore the ground is cursed for his sake, and now he must work by the sweat of his brow he can eat. That's something interesting to notice. Maybe this is why men, specifically, find a lot of worth, self-worth, and self-purpose through their work. Maybe this is why a lot of men are workaholics. It's part of the curse. And Eve, She came from Adam, she came from the man, but now the curse is that she will desire her husband. That's the word that the New King James uses anyways. She will desire her husband, however, he will rule over her. So we had at the very beginning, together they would rule over the entire of creation. Now it's Adam will rule over his wife. That's really important to notice. That's part of the curse. And so for us who claim that we're freed from that through Christ, there's really you have a really difficult time explaining to me then how it is that Paul says we're supposed to be able to continue in that. I don't think that's what the text in Ephesians 5 means. But we can also use this, maybe this is why a lot of girls find, well, they don't find satisfaction, but this is why a lot of high school girls have to go from one guy to the next, and even after high school. There's a lot of girls who go from one guy to the next, to the next, to the next. Maybe this is why. Maybe this is part of it. Maybe this isn't the whole of it, but this is part of it. It stems back from this disunion, from this shame, and from the curse. So the fall here, to cover their nakedness, the man and woman take clothes, or they make clothes from fig leaves. So, I have a note here. The word atonement actually means covering. It's like when you have a wound and you cover it with antiseptic and then you bandage it. And so the idea is there that it's going to clean it and it's going to then heal it. And if you know anything about the fig tree, one of the things you probably know is that the leaf has a curl to it to hide the fruit. And it does hide the fruit. You have to move the leaves out of the way and search for it. And so here it is that Adam and Eve are taking the fig leaf to clothe themselves with. Now that's really incredible because we can see this story in Matthew 21:18 through 22, and then there's also other versions in Mark and Luke, but Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem and he sees this fig tree that has no fruit and he curses it. And he says, may you never bear fruit again. And instantly, this fig tree withers. And the disciples are amazed. And what is it that's happening here? It's almost as if Jesus is looking back to Genesis 3:7, where Adam and Eve covered themselves with fig leaves. And it's through that they hid themselves from God, but they now have obtained what they considered a covering, an atonement of sorts. And it's almost as if Jesus is seeing, as he's entering into Jerusalem, the same mentality at work through the tradition of the elders, through the Talmud and the oral law that they claim that they got from Moses, and all of these things that they've added onto themselves that aren't even in Scripture. But they've added it onto themselves and created heavy burdens for themselves. It's almost as if Jesus is seeing this entire religious system that's been created and manipulated. And he's saying that's the exact same thing that happened in the garden. And he sees that he can trace what's happening in Jerusalem right in front of him back to Genesis 3:7 with the fig tree. And he says there's no fruit on it. There's nothing good of it. And he curses it. And so this is what we consider to be law. It's not simply Leviticus and Deuteronomy. That's something really important to understand. Leviticus and Deuteronomy have their purpose. They have their place. It is called good. God wouldn't have given these books of the Bible for us to just read a long time ago and then now they're obsolete. Either there's eternal significance or we should just throw them out. If we're not going to throw them out, then we need to figure out what is the eternal significance. So what I want you to understand then is that this idea of law, it's this hiding itself. It's hiding yourself with fig leaves. It's man covering himself through a pursuit of a preconceived righteousness. And that is what's important. It's a preconceived righteousness. It's your own idea. You consider for yourself, that is what I think righteous is. Whether it's how often you read the Bible, or how much of the Scripture you have memorized, how often you pray, for how long you can pray at a time, the language that you use or that you don't use, the people you hang around or you don't hang around, these kinds of things that we've taught ourselves, all of the classic, you don't do this if you're a good Christian society, or you don't do this if you're a good Christian, that's a preconceived righteousness, which is not from God. It is law. It is what we've put on ourselves. Now, essentially, works do go hand in hand with faith. This is made quite clear. But the works that go hand in hand with faith are not the works of putting on for ourselves what we think to be righteous. It's instead living in faith, and therefore doing that which the righteous do. The two seeds. You know what? I'm going to wait until next time to do that one. So we're going to go ahead and end here. Hopefully this was good for you. Hit the like button, share it, comment, question it, wrestle with it. Until next time, grace and peace.